Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a video showing all of the contestants that took part in the World War Toons model contest that me and the creator of the video game, Mr. James Chung, announced earlier this week. All week long, people have been sending submissions for their builds to both of the Instagram site and the Facebook page for World War Toons, and I gotta say, I am blown away with the amount and with the quality of submissions that we received. It was way more than my expectations had. I want to give a special congratulations to all of the people who participated, and I will be going over all of the entries in this video. The announcement of the winner, as well as our sit down with me and Mr. James, where we talk back and forth about the models and about the video game and everything else. That's going to be posted in part 2. So for now, let's just look at all of the awesome contributions that people have sent for this contest. Okay, starting this off, we're going to be doing some honorable mentions. We received some content that wasn't really in the World War Toons contest lineup, but they are nicely built models regardless, and so they, are at least deserving of a little bit of airtime. So we're going to start that off with these three over here. The first one is actually a ship. An individual sent us a built Mang USS Missouri caricaturized model. This is not part of the World War Toons lineup, so it's not part of this contest, so it's disqualified in that regard. However, I do want to touch upon that the individual did a nice job with the build, and he actually went ahead and weathered it below the waterline, which is excellent because all too often I've seen nicely built ship models where they're weathered waterline up very well, but the waterline down, the part that's in the salt water all the time, is perfectly clean. So to the individual who built this, you did a good job with the weathering, and I want to applaud your work. The next one, let me just close out of these here. The next honorable mention is a tank. However, it's not in the World War Toons lineup. It's actually a Mang Chinese type, I believe 98, if I'm not mistaken. This was actually a model that Mang made prior to World War Toons hooking up with them, getting the license, and this was their own foray into the caricaturized model genre. The build itself, decently rendered. I like the digital camo pattern that was applied by the builder. That is a tricky paint job to pull off, to get the perfect 90-degree camouflage blotches, and whoever did this did a nice job of rendering that out. So again, I just wanted to mention that. The last honorable mention is something from a completely different genre, which is Warhammer. Warhammer, sadly, is not something that I have any knowledge of with the lore or with the game or any of the models or anything. But I do respect the quality and craftsmanship that goes into the people who, or into the builds that I've seen people like to paint and build. And this one here is no exception. The tires are nicely rendered. The chipping is excellent. The color choices are very nicely done. And I like the meticulous paintwork done on the weapons. It's just, whoever did this, whoever you are, my hat's off to you. You did an excellent job on this model. From there, it takes us to the actual contestants from this contest, and we'll start off here with one that was submitted on Instagram, which is a World War Toons Porsche King Tiger in a active diorama setting. One thing that I love about this model was how the builder went ahead and made the scene dynamic by having the vehicle driving through water and shooting its main round. And one thing I love was how he rendered the shell overscaled, which is more than appropriate for this subject matter. The build itself, it's it's decently built. The guy did an airbrush camouflage 3-tone German scheme on it, which is more than appropriate for a German King Tiger. And overall, I like the execution of the diorama. It's not just a tranquil scene. It's got some some stuff going on in it. That's always it's always an interesting thing to do in a diorama format, and the person who did this did a good job with that. The next one here is with a Russian KV-2. This one, the builder did a good job with the overall execution of the diorama. I like the way everything is composed. For instance, he has that big dud bomb over here in the riverbed, which is nice. The snow effects are also nicely rendered. One thing I liked on this one over the last one, looks like this one was a little bit more improved, was how he rendered out the explosion. I like the way it was shaped. It looks very similar to those still of main battle tanks firing their main cannon, and when you get the nice little snapshot of that, it reminded me a lot of that. Again, overall interesting execution, and it's one that was a nice little addition to have in this this competition. So from here, we're going to go to one of the last submissions from the Instagram page, which is a late, or I should say, what appears to be a last-ditch pattern of a Porsche King Tiger. And if I could bring up that last image, here we go. Okay, so this one here, it's one of those patterns where the hull is left all in primer and the turret is a completely different color, as what I've touched upon before in a few of my videos of the last ditch. The weather on this is very nicely done. If this was something like in 135 or larger, potentially you could argue that the weathering is overdone, but for the World War Toons format, it's definitely appropriate. The one thing I found interesting was the fact that the guy has a Bundeswehr bumper license plate here on the King Tiger, which is it's one of those things that stood out to me. But other than that, it was, which again, World War Toons, anything goes. So it's a nice, interesting build, and it's again, congratulations on the person who submitted it. It's definitely appreciated. So, and that wraps up what we have from Instagram. Now I'm going to switch over to Facebook, and we can continue the remainder of the submissions from this point. Okay, so the first one is this weird mech looking like Sherman Tank. I do want to say I love the way this one's painted and weathered. The chipping on it looks excellent. He has a mixture of both shiny, like freshly scratched steel, as well as old, rusty, and blackened steel in chip format. And the washing is great. I really, really like the way the paintwork was done on this. So, Mr. Todd Norton, you have an excellent build over here. So the next one is this Porsche King Tiger here, which is an excellently built example of the main kit. I love the paintwork on it. I love the weathering on the exhaust, and I like the way it's photographed. Kind of reminds me of my builds. But that aside, it's a very nice example of one of these out-of-the-box renditions of the Meng King Tiger. The next one here is a build that took a little bit more ambition and a little bit more scratch building. This one here, it's a mid-production Tiger that the fellow went ahead and scratch built the entire fighting compartment and engine compartment interior on. And if anyone has ever built one of these models, you'll know that the inside's filled with all sorts of structure and other accoutrements in order to support the weight. And you have to amputate all that in order to clean out to do the interior. And this fellow here did that, and it definitely shows. The model is one of the more elaborate builds that I've seen on this submitted for this contest, and it definitely is one that is memorable. So I also like the the use of what appears to be, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Jack Larson, but this might be a old school Dragon photo etch Panther G mesh cover. It kind of looks like the ones I've seen on a lot of my retro builds, but it's a nice use of that, and also gets you to peek into the engine compartment. So that's interesting to point out. The interior detailing, if anyone has built any interior versions of the Tiger 1, it definitely shows. And also you did the Zimmer coating on the outside too, so that's interesting as well. Moving on down, takes us to another Tiger 1. This is a mid-production Tiger 1, and this one here appears to be a snow camo one. Now, of course, as I said before, I'm not really a fan of snow paint jobs. I hate the wintertime. I hate the snow, so that's why you'll never see them from me. But, I appreciate good craftsmanship when I see it, and this one does exhibit that. The snow effects are in just the right amount of areas, and they are to scale, and they actually enhance the build as opposed to being a detriment on them, so, good on you for that. I really dig the way the exhausts are rendered. Again, you really know how to paint your exhaust, Mr. J. Evans, a man of my heart. And one thing I love here is what I always mention in my videos is painting the staves, and you definitely did them the way I generally talk about, where the ends are painted in brass and the midsections are painted in wood. So good on you for that. Okay, so that's it for this one here. Moving on to the next one. A French Soma. The Soma, it's a pretty solid kit. I just finished one a little while ago. And, the paintwork is nicely done on it. These French tanks are always very colorful, and this one here is no exception. This is again from Mr. J. Evans, so just not making my job any easier for the competition. Moving on down, takes us to a T-34-76. For a second, again, I thought it was one of my builds, Mr. Evans. I love the modulation on this one. And the edging is also nicely done. The highlights are good. I love the way the track is weathered. I like the way that's been pulled off. The track itself was, you added a little drop of accent over there to each one of the pins. It's a nice way to make it shine. And I love what you did here with the grill work. Very nicely done. The next one, I honestly thought this was a picture of my 38T that I just posted, but instead, no, this is, again, from Mr. Evans. This is the stock kit, and it was built very, very nice. I like the modulation. I like the way you highlighted all the rivets, which on a 38T is just infested with. And the exhaust, again, you really, you have some excellent rendered exhaust. Nothing really much to talk about here, but again, nice base overall. Moving on down takes us to another vehicle, this time from a different submitter. This one is a mid-production Tiger 1 kit that was backdated to a initial desert North Africa version of the Tiger 1. And this was done by scratch building new front fenders here, where he amputated the broad fenders and replaced them with scratch built ones that mimic the look of the original diamond plate fenders, which were found on the tanks that took part in the North African campaign. So interesting choice. I also like the addition of the FIFO system, sir. That's a nice touch to backdate it further. Another vehicle, this one we have two pictures of this one. This is a Panzer IV that looks like has been upgraded or is trying to pass off as a Panzer IV Alf J with the slat late war grille armor. It's nicely done. I like the way the grille was fabricated here with the slats, and I also like the idea of using primer red for the grille or for the side skirt, the shirts in. It's a nice way to add a little bit extra pop to the model and, breaking up the color from the standard camouflage. So that was also a nice touch. Mr. Jack Larson. Okay, so this one here is a twofer from Mr. Carl Turney. It is what we have here, two French Char B1 Bis heavy tanks, and both of them are rendered with the two options that are supplied with the kit. One is in French with three-tone camo, and the other is in German. Actually, it's not just a single color. It appears that you went with a dual tone. It's just Panzer Gray with a darker shade of Panzer Gray for this option. So again, thank you for the submission, and let's continue on to what we have next. Oh, this is that same Tunisia pattern Tiger that I mentioned before, only here we have a nice picture of the rear end, and here you get to see the FIFO system in better detail. Our next subscriber, or I should say our next submission, is from Mr. Greg Quine. This here is a diorama of a mid-production Tiger 1, and just like with the last diorama, this guy also featured a dud bomb over here in the house to give a little bit extra interest to the scene, makes the scene a little bit more dynamic. I like the way he rendered out the destroyed wall here, where you have the red brick on the inside between layers of paint, and the tank itself is also decently rendered. You did a really good job with painting the single Dunkelgelb coloring, which, by the way, I gotta say, it's actually harder than it looks to make a model in Dunkelgelb as opposed to a camouflage pattern. It adds a little bit more to the weathering, and you definitely did a good job with that. I like the way it was washed with the various colors and other techniques that you used. Also, you went ahead and added a figure on this one here, which, even though I don't believe this is part of the World War II's lineup, it's definitely appropriate for the subject matter, and it really does just work. So, good on you for that. The next one here is an excellently weathered example of the stock Mang Panzer IV World War II's kit. I'm really enjoying the work you did here with the chipping and the edging. It looks fantastic. You can see some other camera angles of it, and this looks like it was actually filmed with a lit firework underneath. I hope the model survived okay, because I would hate to see a model this nice get destroyed from a firework. And we have here a little wargaming session going on, where we have the Panzer IV and also one of your Tiger 1s painted in the same format. So I'm pretty sure you did the same techniques on that one too. Which, by the way, good on you if you did, because it looks nice. Next one down is the first from a massive load from Mr. Pete Lowe. This one here is another 38T. It's weathered slightly different compared to the last one we saw, but that doesn't detract at all from the build itself. This one has a lot of modulation going on here, a lot of washing, and overall, again, it's going to be a very difficult contest in order to figure out who's going to get first and second place. But overall, nice work, Mr. Pete Lowe. We're returning back to our man, Jay Evans, who has another Stewart taken from my pictures. I'm just kidding. This is definitely his work, but it's very nicely done. Excellent modulation here. The decals are nice and flat, and I got to commend you, sir, on painting the track appropriately, where the metal parts are rendered to look like metal, while the rubber pads look like rubber. So that is, again, this is a nicely built rendition of the Mang M5 kit, which, by the way, it's an excellent kit. I highly recommend it. One last one here from our man, Mr. Evans, which is a Russian KV-2. Similar format as the other vehicles that I've touched upon before from him, with the same type of weathering techniques. And again, these KVs never disappoint. They make for great builds. I think this is the last one from Mr. Evans, which is a pretty much standard M4A1. I love the modulation you did here. The washing looks excellent too. It's weathered in just the right places with the right amount. You also went out of the kit a little bit by adding a little bit of extra crew equipment tied onto the back, which is, although admittedly not something that I'm into, but I will say, I do appreciate good handiwork when I see it, and this definitely exhibits that. So, yeah, it's an excellent build nonetheless. Carry on. Probably one of the more ambitious builds I've seen so far, which is a M32 Recovery Vehicle, which is a recovery vehicle based on the M4A1 Sherman. And this one here, it's gorgeous. I love the amount of work and the amount of effort that went into this, and the imagination it took to take that vehicle and cartoonize it to make it fit in the World War II's universe. This is definitely something that shows a lot of creativity. You went ahead and replaced the suspension with 1/35 scale tank parts. And by the way, I got to commend you on drilling out the 4 holes here found on the VVSS suspension housing. That's something that I always advocate on my videos, and you did that here on this build, and it looks awesome. So congratulations, sir, on that. The remainder of the scratch building work looks exquisite. I'm really digging this one, and it's because of builds like this is why this contest is going to be so hard to judge. So I appreciate all the applicants. And just when I thought things couldn't get any harder, here we have another submission from Mr. Pete Lowe, which is a Churchill bridge layer. The bridge, or it's not even a layer, it's just a bridge itself. And this is one of the funnies that took part in D-Day. And very bizarre, interesting choice of vehicle, and one that was executed equally as well. I love the chain work here, and the fact that you made the thing fully functional is that much cooler. The addition, or I should say the replacement of the track with what appears to be Tamiya single piece, or maybe AFV Club single piece vinyl track, it definitely is something that looks very nice. So I'm just getting another close-up of that again, just so people can appreciate that. Okay. Again, excellent subject matter, and even equally as excellent execution. Some more from Mr. Pete, which is a Panzer IV with the shirts in. This one, it's the mesh shirts in, and I like the way you use some kind of photo etch mesh or plastic mesh for the shirts in itself. It looks very nice. And you went a little further on this one, rendering it as the Alf J with the Alf J tubular exhaust. So that's a very nice touch, Mr. Pete. Carrying on, takes us to an M10 Achilles, which is a British variant of the M10 armed with a 17-pounder. And if Mr. James is watching this, this would be a really, really cool addition to have to the World War II's kit collection. Too bad I don't see any pictures of the fighting compartment interior. That's something I would have actually liked to see, but so far from what I see here, it's a very nice rendition here. If I'm not mistaken, I believe this must be a scratch built upper hull as well as the turret, so that's also very good on your part for scratch building something like this. And again, making it fit and shoehorning it onto the kit, it's definitely something that's no real easy task. You also went ahead and changed out some parts of the suspension right over here with some 1/35 scale tank parts, which again is a way to give a little bit more authenticity to the model, and just a way to make it just a little bit more polished. Another one here from Mr. Pete is a Birch Panther. This one here is the version with the wooden round floorboards where the turret would have been originally. I really like the concept. I mean, you did the M32, and this one here is around the same vein. This one here has some really nice work here done on the scratch built boom. That's really cool, and I like the way you extended the exhaust manifolds. That's a nice touch as well. The bumper added in the front, I like the way you weathered up the wood. Again, it shows a lot of effort put into this build here. Carrying on with the funnies, takes us to a bulldozer blade equipped M4A1 Sherman, and again, just some more 1/35 scale tank parts dropped in here and there, and the blade is nice and scratch built. What's interesting is that the blade has the look, feel, and detailing of the real bulldozer blade, and if you ever saw one on a real Sherman, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And I love the chain work, as well as the master link over here. That's something that's a nice little touch. I believe you also, if I'm not mistaken, modified the mantlet to make it the early pattern of M34 mantlet, and if you did, again, it definitely shows you're putting a little bit extra elbow grease into your build. Another build that really was one that caught my eye is this version here of the Churchill, but this one here is one with the mortar on the top, which is one of my favorite variants of the Churchill. It's just so bizarre looking in normal, form, let alone in World War II's format. I like the use of a cast turret. I don't know if this is an aftermarket part or if you modify the original one or scratchable one, but regardless, it looks excellent on this body. The mortar you nailed it with the mortar. It's definitely what you would expect it to look like in this scale. And I really like the work and stuff you did back here on the wading trunks and the extended exhaust manifold. Very nice touch. And the color is perfect. This is an excellent build. I definitely, my hat's off to you on this one. Carrying further is a M4A1 with the T-34 Calope rocket system, or known as the Screamin' Mimi. It's kind of like verbatim from what I said from muscle memory from my other videos. This one here, very interesting. The rocket tubes definitely have that balance between detailing and cartoony feel to them. The remainder of the model looks fantastic. I love the use again of 1/35 scale parts for the suspension, and also I got to give you props for using or recycling the 1/35 scale or motorized spare sprocket that comes with the Tamiya or Academy M60 A1 tank kits. That's definitely something like, I see what you did there type thing. It definitely fits. It looks really, really cool, and it's a nice use of spare parts, definitely. The rocket bed looks great. I love the way the wires all come out of it and funnel into the vehicle just like it does on the real one. This is definitely one of the more memorable builds I've seen. It's really nicely executed. Here we go. Another conversion. This is backdating the M5 Stewart to an M3 Lee Honey. And this one here, the weathering, I absolutely adore on it. I love the paintwork. The pattern is great to begin with, but the weathering looks like, it doesn't even look like it was like in a war. This thing looks like it was in a scrapyard for about 40 years. In fact, when I saw this, it immediately reminded me of the real M3 A1 Stewart that I did a walk around on and video of. And that one just was like almost in the exact same condition. And so I particularly really enjoyed it. The weathering is great. The scratch building of the backdating of the upper hull to a M3 was very well executed, and also interesting enough used M4 pattern of track and sprocket, which is wider compared to the one found on the Stewart. But again, for the subject matter here, it's definitely appropriate, I feel. Moving on takes us to, this is one that I've known about. I just don't know the name. This is like one of those like weird experimental Shermans that the U.S. was messing around with after World War II, or I think it might be even a paper Panzer, where I think it's a command vehicle where there's no turret on it. It's just radios on the inside. That's why we have all these radio antenna bases protruding outward. I like the use of the late war commander's cupola on it. It's a nice little touch. And again, the excellent use of using a replacement 1/35 scale track and running gear. It's a way to give a little bit more veritas, like I stated before. Also, interestingly enough, you use a M3 VVSS on this one as opposed to an M4, which for the subject matter of an early M4A1 is definitely one that is appropriate indeed. And also, it's a nice way to make it different compared to even your other builds, which clearly you are a big fan of. And speaking of conversion work, here we have our main man, Pete Lowe, again with a conversion of the Char B1 Bis into the captured B1 Bis by the Germans, who then went and turned into a Panzerjäger. And this one here is probably one of the more ambitious builds that I've seen so far. And I've seen a lot of cool builds. And this one's really interesting because of the conversion work needed to get, replaced from French to German BU status. Like you played it over the 75 section here, you scratch built the entire superstructure in the fighting compartment, and although you covered it with a nice little tarp conveniently. That's a nice touch. I see what you did there. But it just reeks of World War II's, and that's fantastic. The track, it is definitely not the kit one. I think you scratch built this one from what I can tell. I don't know if this is like an aftermarket something, but it looks like you actually use little metal wires twist tied together in order to get the hinge, which is interesting, very interesting, and also somehow yet very appropriate for this subject matter. And also the eyelet too. I definitely see what you did there. So excellent choice of a vehicle. Obscure, but definitely a nice choice. Okay, so this appears to be the same walking Sherman mod that was done on the other contestant. This must be a 3D printed or a cast resin kit, I believe, to upgrade the World War II's model. This one here has the addition of the tulip firing system that's mounted on the turret, which is interesting and somewhat obscure feature found on several Sherman tanks. Mostly they were Commonwealth, but still cool nonetheless. It's well executed, and it's, again, a nice way to add a little bit more uniqueness to your collection by mounting it on this walking variant. And the Germans shouldn't have all the fun with these weird walking concepts. Execution wise, again, nicely done. If I'm not wrong, correct me if I'm not mistaken, but this antenna looks like a 1/6 scale 21st Century Toys antenna base from, I believe, the Humvee, if I'm not mistaken. It's like I've seen this, I've been here before. Overall, nice use on it. It really brings out more of that cartoonish feel to it. And speaking of weird, obscure vehicles, we have a Egyptian M4A4 with the French AMX 13 turret. It's a very bizarre tank indeed, and in World War II's format, it's even cooler. I like the use of the 3-bar cleat track, which is the coolest of the Sherman VVSS track. And also, again, you went ahead and used a VVSS Sherman bogie housing, but you drilled out those 4 holes. Again, congratulations on that. The turret is nicely rendered. Again, it has that look and feel of, what it's supposed to be. And, it's just a nice conversion of a very bizarre and interesting variant of the Sherman family. Okay, so now we got some more conventional builds coming out of you, which is a French Char B1 Bis. Again, adequately built out of the box. I think you changed out the antenna base over here, making it with the version with the fins on them, but it's again a nice little addition. One constructive criticism I would point out though is that if you are going to do this, you might as well also paint, and even if you don't do this, just the antenna bases are amber. I believe they're porcelain on the real vehicles. So by painting that with that porcelain there, it's a nice way to give your model a little extra pop. Besides that, though, it's a totally nice looking build. I like the weathering on it. I like the edging, the scratch, the exposed steel look on several of these edges over here. It looks great. It definitely looks the part. And overall, nice build. Very nice build. Okay, we got here a Chaffee. This is actually the one kit that I've yet to build from them. So this is a little bit... I'm not sure what you add yourself as opposed to what's with the kit, but I'm pretty sure these tracks here appear to be aftermarkets. I think they're Lincoln length. It looks, it's a Chaffee. Quality-wise, it's basically on par with some of the other builds that I've seen you post. So, overall, nice job. Next one is a Su-76I, which is a weird Russian captured Panzer III that was turned into a tank destroyer by the Russians, and to do that they added this really cool and distinctive superstructure here, which is something that was done to perfection on this example right here. The paintwork is great, the weathering is even better, and I also love the little weld bead details that you built into it. Overall, a nice piece. Very nice piece. All right, so now we're getting into the cool stuff. This here is a Churchill. I believe I have one of these kits from AFV Club in the stash. This was supposed to be a tank destroyer, like with a casemate design, but they turned it into this rocket-firing vehicle. I think those are Bangalore torpedoes, if I'm not mistaken. Forgive me, guys, my lack of knowledge on this particular vehicle. I've yet to build one, but I know of its existence. And this one here, it definitely looks the part. It has the weird superstructure, and it's in cartoony format, and the tubes are all represented, and with one quick glance you instantly know what you're looking at. It's a dead ringer for what this vehicle is supposed to be. Okay, we already talked about you, and we have another Porsche King Tiger over here. This one is again by our man Mr. Pete Lau, and it's a King Tiger, but it's not stock. I could see that the builder went ahead and amputated out the tin work, which adds a little bit more dynamic to the model. The tracks, interestingly enough, are from a Tiger 1, which normally would be like, huh? But, it's World War II, so hey, that's cool. The paint job is neat. The Zemrit looks great. It's just it's a nicely weathered piece overall. Our next submission is again from Mr. Pete, and this is an M3 Lee, and the M3 Lee is probably one of the most perfect vehicles to World War II'ify, because even in proper scale, the M3 is a cartoonish looking vehicle. So seeing it in this format here just makes it all that much more better. And the execution was nicely done. It's an M3, and it's a British pattern M3, which is cool in its own right as well. I like the use of the replacement of the suspension. That's another way to give it again more gravitas. And you went again with the M3 Lee bogie housing, which it definitely looks the part and looks really good. Well, as I touched upon before, that other version of the Churchill with those rockets on it was based off of a tank destroyer version, and here we have none other than the tank destroyer version of the Churchill. This thing again looks weird and wonky normally, let alone in World War II's format, and this one here does not miss a beat at all. I'm not sure if you used a conversion kit or if this is scratch built, but regardless, it looks really good either way. The use of replacement track, again, it adds a little bit more flavor to the build, and again, it makes it pop as opposed to using the track that's supplied with the kit. And here's Mr. Pete again with his version of a Tiger 1. This one here is backdated to an early production unit where we, interestingly enough, have King Tiger tracks on this one, while the King Tiger had Tiger 1 tracks, so that's kind of noteworthy. I like the deletion of the fenders and the blocks are in place, and I like the S-mines that you mounted to the top deck. It's a nice little trick that you did here. The cupola looks nice, and the addition of what appears to be to me a FIFO system is also another way to backdate it further. Also, one thing I want to point out, generally there are 5 of these grenades on the hull of the Tiger 1, but, being World War II's format, 6 just looks all that much more appropriate, and it's probably how I would have rendered it myself if I would have did a build like this. Oh, and the use of a 1/3 scale Tiger 1 barrel is another way that this build was improved. And one last thing I want to mention, I see what you did here with the front, where you cut off the fenders, but you left that little overhang of armor plate. That's a nice touch, my friend. That's something that definitely shows your front plate pattern on these Tiger 1s quite well. And here we have, to make my job all that much more harder, is a Russian Su-100 tank destroyer. This is obviously based on the T-34-76 kit from the Mang World War II's line, and I like the way it was retrofitted into this format. First, I want to point out, I love the white stripe around the fighting compartment. That's something that looks always awesome on Russian tanks. The track looks great. It's another, like you've done before on your Shermans and your Tigers, it's a nice way to add a little bit of detailing. I like that the antenna is in the retracted state. That's a nice touch. And overall, it's very well executed. Nice work indeed. And speaking of ambitious projects, here we have a conversion of the Tiger 1 into a Burj Tiger, which of course there's only one of these vehicles ever made. It was done in field, and people to this day still don't know what it actually did. The work that went into fabrication of the winch mechanism is very impressive. I like the MG34 up here. It definitely looks the part. And the paint job is very unique. It kind of reminds me of scales, or it's actually very similar to the Malta pattern found on Matildas and some Valentines, but that's a topic for another video. Overall, again, excellently rendered, nice vehicle to even pick, and also the use of real Tiger 1 tracks. Again, it's another way that your build definitely pops. Also, one last thing I want to point out, I want to give you kudos for painting the tips here of the cleaning staves. Like I stated before, it's something that I always mention in these videos, and congratulations, you did that on this build here. So, good job overall. Flapjacks, anyone? Here we have a M4A1 Aunt Jemima, and I'm not sure again if this is a conversion set or if this is a scratch build, but it looks great. It looks, again, it makes my job all that much harder. Whoever did this, if you built this yourself or if this is a conversion kit, really knows what the Aunt Jemima looks like, because it has all of the little buckles, straps, clamps, and even the cog chain that would be found on the real unit. And the look of the Aunt Jemima itself, it just fits right into the World War II universe. It looks great. The weathering is also nicely done. It's a nicely thought out build. So again, thanks for sharing that with us. And of course, someone's going to do a Hetzer. Why wouldn't they do a Hetzer? it's right there for the pickings. Hetzer, obviously based on the 38T format. And this one here, if you ever wondered what a Hetzer would look like in World War II's format, Mr. Pete Lowe over here just showed you what it would look like. So congratulations on that. I love the edging on the weathering here. It looks really nice. It looks like a little dirty little build, which is it's perfect. It definitely it looks like it's been there, done that. So good work on that for pulling that off. All right, so of course there's a T-34-76, but why not upscale that to the T-34-85? Pete again, I'm not sure if this is again a scratch build or if it's a conversion, but I like the giant seam found along the sides of the turret. It kind of reminds me of the Armortech T-34-85 turret that I did a little while ago, and yeah, it's with the same type of results. It's a T-34-85, so it definitely looks the part. It has little handles on it. It looks great. T-34s are neat. They are neat. Yeah, this one gives me a little bit of a laugh or chuckle. It's an early Stug 3, and the Stug 3 is always a really cool looking vehicle, and in World War II's format, it's that much cooler. I love how abridged the fighting compartment is here. It has the shape of it, but it's just smushed into this like little fraction of a size, and it definitely looks the part. I love it. Yeah, this is a nice little piece. Ooh, it appears here your tracks are breaking though, so your paint might be having a negative reaction with the rubber or something. But yeah, you might want to get that looked at. Let me go back to that. Yeah, nice execution overall. I really like this one. It looks cool. Porsche Tiger. So this was also an awesome kit done by Meng itself. But Mr. Pete over here took it to the next level by adding a ton of 1/35 scale parts to it to spice it up, like smoke grenade launchers, a new barrel, tracks, all the running gear. Although oddly enough, it should get 2 sprockets, but and not the Henschel pattern rear either. But again, World War Toons, let's have fun with it. I like the tips painted on the staves, of course. Good job with that. It's a nice little build. These Porsche Tigers are always really, really cool. I always had a soft spot for them. All right, here we have a Matilda. The Matilda is a great kit. It's one of my favorites in the World War II's lineup. And Mr. Pete over here did an adequate job with the build. Looks great. Nice and dirty and scratched up. I like the tape here on the exhaust. Nice little touch. Overall, it's a fantastic build. And, although it's more conventional compared to some of the other ones Mr. Lowe has presented us, it definitely is not, by any means, any insignificant. And I'm surprised I hit the bottom of the listing because there were some other builds on here that I did see that I haven't talked about. And one of them caught my eye. It was an Israeli gunnery target Sherman. Basically, it's a Sherman tank without a turret that they have armor like strapped to the sides in an angle format, and your job was to drive around a gunnery range and other tanks would shoot at you. Like literally, I'm pretty sure this job must have been given to screw-ups or something. And what was neat was the armor that was bolted to the sides were made from scrap tanks. So it was scrap armor plate from Shermans and T-34s and whatever the Israelis could get their hands on. And the individual, I think it was Pete, he actually went ahead and fabricated one of those. And it was a really interesting, bizarre variant of the Sherman in 135, let alone in World War II's format. And it was really cool. And for some reason, I can't seem to find it. I guess it got gobbled up by the Zuckerberg gods. That's a real shame because it was really cool. And I think he also did an Israeli M51 as well, in a similar format. But sadly, I can't show that to you because Zuckerberg gobbled it up. But anyway, so those are the contestants we have. And again, I want to thank everyone who submitted their models for the contest. And this is definitely not going to be something that's going to be easy for me to undertake. There's a lot. I wish it was going to be easier, but this is going to be a tough one. There are some really, really excellent builds. And again, congratulations to everyone who submitted. And we're going to be announcing the winner and also having our little back and forth. But more information on that is to come in part 2 of this video. So until then, enjoy this video. And if you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel and all that good stuff. And from there, I'll catch you all again on part 2. So from there, I bid you farewell and peace out.